A really good teacher once described the awakening process like looking through the lens of a camera. Our first awakening experience, be that Kundalini or otherwise, brings that lens into sharp, clear clarity, sharp focus. And then as the ego comes back in after a while, that focus is lessened somewhat and we get that wavy, pixelated picture, don't we? And this is the action of the ego and the pulse of the awakening process, the expansion and the contraction from clarity back to ego. Once you've had the awakening experience though, and you've seen through that clear lens, you'll never go back to seeing life the same way again. The focus may change and we may see life through our ego, although our ego might be a bit different now. An ego is still there, usually, unless we're a very, very rare human. I'm going to talk a little bit about this process of the lens of awakening, focusing and unfocusing, but also how Kundalini awakening brings about a state of being in which we are seeing life truly for the first time through the eyes of God. So when I use this terminology, God, of course you can put your own words onto it. It doesn't just mean God, because we have a lot of, affiliations with that word. It could mean Allah, it doesn't matter. It could mean source energy. It could mean life itself. It could mean the universe. I use these terms synonymous, and God doesn't mind what we use, or the universe doesn't mind what we use as a terminology. He doesn't get offended. He, she, it, whatever it is. Anyway. When we have a Kundalini awakening, in one moment, an eruption of bliss and ecstasy up the spine, and then an expansion in our consciousness delivers us, after that experience, into a state of being of clear clarity. And I think it's Adyashanti who uses the terminology of looking through, it's like looking through a focused lens in a camera screen. Once we have that awakening experience and we're in that state of being of clarity, we see life as it truly is, without our distortions, without our illusions. Of course, our illusions are created in our mind. For example, just thinking from my life, like negativity in the mind is an illusion. It's not really what's here. What's here is just here. Does that make sense? What's here just is. There's no negativity. That's our spin on things. That's our conditioning coming through. And in a moment of awakening, we see through that clear clarity of the lens. Now, because we're looking through clarity, we begin to notice as the lens wavers out of focus again, as the ego comes back in as we go through our experience, and we start seeing things through that conditioned mindset. We start seeing things based upon our belief structures again, don't we? Because after a Kundalini awakening, our beliefs come back in. But we're never quite the same. We're never quite the same. Though the lens may well be out of focus, we're still looking at the clear picture. It's a bit fuzzy for us, but we know what life's about. We know what's going on here because we've seen through the yin and the yang of life, if that makes sense, in an awakening experience like that. We've seen through the illusory sense of self, meaning that egoic identity in the mind. We've seen, if we use a yogic terminology, in between the Ida and the Pingala, the yin and the yang, the sun and the moon, the masculine, feminine. We've seen that central point of clarity, of seeing life exactly the way it is, and I used this terminology in the intro, of seeing life through the eyes of God. We're all that God consciousness. God is not separate from ourselves, or we're all that source energy. We're all that universal energy. None of us is separate, but we do tend to create this egoic identity, this one in the mind, this negative one that sees the world through distortion, through that unfocused lens. And the process of the awakening experience, once you've had your awakening experience in the first instance, yes, the lens does close back over again and we see through that jaded focus. And that's the ego coming back in. But The ego's time now is limited. We will then, through looking through that lens and looking through that unfocused lens, we start doing things that are unfocused. Oh my god, it's analogous to the journey anyway, because focus brings clarity. What do I mean by focus? I mean meditation focus, I mean yoga focus, I mean focusing on positive thoughts. And focus does bring clarity, and if you're in a moment where you're unfocused, where that lens is almost, the cap's back on the lens. Of course, you can never put the cap back on the lens. Once the cap's off, once you've awakened, you'll always see things differently, right? But maybe just with a jaded picture. But if the ego has come back, which it likely will, then you're more than welcome to, down below, sign up for a free breathing practice. It will sign you up for a marketing list in which you can buy the Dark Night of the Soul breathing practices. They just work. I've experienced them through me. They got me out of the darkness night of the soul in the quickest way possible for me. They're powerful yogic practices that you're more than welcome to sign up for. Nonetheless, the free breathing practice will awaken a sense of clarity inside of yourself. It will bring you into dynamic stillness, we call it in yoga, meaning that clear state of being through which we can see through the eyes of Source, Universe, God, etc. We can cultivate it in ourselves, again, if we've had a Kundalini awakening, or we can begin to cultivate it regardless of whether we've had a Kundalini awakening or not. It's a state of being that we're beginning to cultivate through sadhana, meaning yoga, or pranayams, meaning breathing practices. Of course, as well, if you wish, if you've gone through an experience and you don't know what's going on in your life and you're lost and you're stuck, and you can sign up down below for the one-to-one coaching. It's very affordable. Back to the video. The timer's ticking now on the ego. The timer's ticking on seeing life out of focus. Now, we can accelerate this process through sadhana, but it's almost like, I suppose, once we see with the clarity of that state of being that the Kundalini awakening will put you into, once we've seen with that, our life will fade in and out of focus, meaning the clarity, seeing life through the eyes of God, these aha moment little things that we get inside of ourselves, that will fade in and out for a while until we see fully the full picture, the full clarity of the lens, of the image through the lens, without that wavering focus meaning that ego that keeps coming back in. It will for a time come in and out of focus, and we'll see the big picture, and then we'll go back to our old ways, and then we'll see the big picture, and then we'll go back to our old ways and continue making the same mistakes over and over and over again until we learn. And when we learn, oh, that's why I was doing that. Oh, I see with true clarity now. I'm seeing life through the eyes of God in me, if that makes sense. As we begin to detach from that identification to that egoic mindset, or to the unfocused lens, if we can use this analogy, we might begin seeing, perhaps, and I know this in my life, that none of this stuff is really happening to me as the witness. This is just all playing itself out in perfect synchronicity and perfect harmony. I don't need to much bother and get involved and fiddle and try and focus the lens myself, because it's just a natural progression. Yes, I can help that progression and accelerate my awakening process by doing the sadhana, but we don't have to get so caught up in this mindset, and I'm guilty of this, we all are. And we don't have to take ourselves so seriously. We can just lighten up. If we're going to have another awakening experience, it will happen in due time, in perfect timing. It's not for us to worry about. We just need to stay earnest if we can in our own journey, do our practices daily, and create create this body, which I'll call a vessel. We can create this vessel in a way so that it's open in the best possible way for something else to come in, for another experience, but we do that through consistent sadhana. I hope this video helps. I hope that brings clarity in a moment where we're totally unclear, perhaps. Or I hope it reaffirms and gives comfort to you on a journey where the road is less walked, if that makes sense. Where not so many people have taken this journey, where we can feel isolated, where we can feel alone because nobody else is doing it, because everybody else is living their lives through their minds. And if you've gone one step deeper and the Kundalini's allowed you to do that, and you're living life through your being, and you do feel isolated, then down below you can sign up for our free Awakening Help group. It's totally free, and it's private on Facebook. That'll do. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice evening.